Welcome, everyone. My name is Lindsay Durand. I use she, her pronouns, and welcome to APTA Live Student Night. Tonight's topic is on where PTs and PTAs fit in the topic of global health. As we've been dealing and living through a global pandemic over the last year and a half, many people in the physical therapy profession have stopped to ask, where do PTs and PTAs fit? Where do we fit in this global pandemic, and where do we fit in terms of global health? And what is our role and our duty beyond service to our local and global communities? So for tonight's discussion, we are joined by Dr. Jennifer Audette and Dr. Efosa Guobadia, who both have incredible insight on what it means to serve globally. And so I will give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves and give a little bit about their background information. Both of our guests have incredible stories and things that they've been doing in the context of global health. And so I have a feeling you'll be equally as inspired as I was hearing their background information. But first, I would love to hear where everyone is tuning in from. If you're a student, a PT, PTA, even a pre-PT, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, what year you are, and where you go to school. And if you'd like to spread the word about this event, tell people what you think, and continue this conversation tonight, go ahead and use the hashtag APTA Live and tag us on Twitter at APTA Students or on Facebook and Instagram at APTA Student Members. And then if you have any questions throughout tonight's event, please drop them in the chat, and we'll really do our best to try to answer those questions and give you all a great discussion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to know our panelists. So I'll bring back Dr. Jennifer Audette and Dr. Efosa Guobadia to kind of give their backgrounds. Jenny, would you like to start off just kind of giving us a little bit of information on your background and how you got into the world of global health?
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks everybody for logging in tonight. Efosa and I both hope we can share some really great information with you. I became a PT back in the 1980s when it was still a bachelor's degree profession. And after that, I pretty much went right back to school and did an advanced master's in physical therapy and focused primarily on neurology and pediatric early intervention PT. After that, I worked as a clinician for several years and then worked my way into director of rehab position at a hospital, and did that for about 10 years. And then I entered academia. At that point, I started working on a PhD, and actually my dissertation work was related to studying faculty who take students abroad. So my career really has evolved over the many years that I've been a PT. And I think my understanding of global health has expanded during that time, and certainly my involvement in global health has. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But right now, I am the program director at the University of New England in Portland, Maine. I live in Maine. I've been here for about 2.5 years. I grew up and spent most of my life in Rhode Island, but I'm happy to be a Mainer now. And I think I'll leave it at that for now until we get to our questions. Thanks, Lindsay.
Absolutely. Efosa, go ahead and introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and tell us where you are today.
Well, happy Sunday, everybody. It's so great to be sharing time with you all today, those who are joining us live. And Lindsay, thanks for your hospitality. And Jenny, Dr. Audette, great to share this space with you. A bit about my story, a quick snapshot. I guess my story started global a little bit. I was born in Nigeria, and then my family, and along with myself, of course, moved to New York. I grew up in New York, in the city before going to the suburbs, Long Island, undergrad at UMass, grad school to get my clinical doctorate at the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania. And that was an important part of my journey as we talk about some things. One of the mantras or the themes of that university is to be men and women for others. And what might that look like on a micro and a macro level? What might that look like near and far? After I graduated, which was in 2010, I practiced clinically in an outpatient setting for a couple of years in Chicago. And very early on with the company that I was with, I was able to start a program called Mission Works. And with that program, I was able to collaborate with different colleagues and coworkers from around the country, actually, to work with different NGOs and 501c3s in different parts around the world with different missions. to see what hopefully good we could do with minimizing and avoiding any harm, and learned a bit across the spectrum. Relatively speaking, we learned a bit. So that took me to 2010 to 2014, to 2014 into 2015. I did a trip around the world, went to 22 countries in 8 months. And the idea was to create this montage and mosaic of health, service, and physical therapy around the world to get a sense of our similarities, to get a sense of our differences, the beauties that lie within those two categories. And I learned much, I felt much, and much is still stirred within me from that trip. Along that trip, I was able to co-found the global initiative, now PT Day of Service, while I was in the Amazon River in 2015, February of. And then once I came back, started to lay the foundation to start a nonprofit organization called Move Together, whose mission is to increase access to quality rehab medicine around the corner and around the world, and looking to promote transformation through the power of movement. And that's our foundation. Now I am currently in Guatemala City, Guatemala. That's where I'm hailing from and calling from right now, and continue to work on Move Together. We have some different projects and programs here, which we'll talk about more down the road. And also on the journey of developing an integrated wellness concept and system and space that I hope to share in other places around the world, poke up a bit at a time. So that's a bit of the story, and then we'll dive in more as we continue on.
Like I said, both of our guests have very interesting backgrounds and have really done a lot in the world of global health. So just that intro there, I'm getting excited for the rest of this talk. How did you both end up on this path to global health? Like, what was your big why, or your big kind of moment where you're like, I think I'm going to follow this and head down that road? Whoever wants to start.
I'll start. Well, I certainly have always grown up with a sense that we have a responsibility to give back. That started very, very early on in my household. It was something that occurred all the time. And so I had a sense of that. And when I became a professional, I wanted to be able to do that same thing in some capacity. And for me, that ended up doing some volunteer work internationally. And so my focus within the global health arena is really on international work. And I realize I say that because our definition of global health is, like Efosa said, around the corner and around the world. And so global health, we really mean, health and access and all those good things for people, no matter where they live. But anyway, my focus has really been in the international realm. And I did my first international volunteer trip in 1994, where I went with a large group of healthcare providers to China. There were lots of good things about that trip, but there were also lots of not so great things about how that trip was organized, and the mark that we left, and the people's view of our having been there. And so I learned a lot, even from my very first international experience, about the good and bad of international work. Since then, I've been involved with health volunteers overseas, whose mission is educational. And so I've been involved in a couple of their projects in Suriname, in South America, in Haiti, and I'm currently doing some work in Guatemala through health volunteers overseas. In addition, I started doing kind of my own thing through my university and taking students to do service work. So it's kind of, that's the way it sort of has grown and started.
Same. I love that so much, Jenny, and many similar overlaps. That culture was very much instilled in my household growing up, so that was always there. And there's a lot of pithy sort of sayings that come to mind. I think about Muhammad Ali's saying, he goes, the good, and however we discern good that we do for others, is a rent that I pay for my stay here on earth. It's sort of that putting hopeful good into the ether a bit. And I would think that the same thing that attracts us all to the profession, why we became professionals, is the same thing that pulls us into community health and global health, coming alongside others to promote wellness, to promote a discernment of collective better, so all those then drive. And Jenny used the concept around the corner, around the world, that we're saying those same things as attract us professionally, and we're engaging and collaborating with others in the space of wellness in a compassionate way, empathetic way. The way I think about the word compassion, passion means suffering, yeah? The original word, and compassion means to suffer with. So when we step in alongside our clients and community and patients, suffering with, in that place of pain and possibility. And then I don't think there's a distinction, whether it's around the corner, around the world, whether it's within the clinic walls or beyond. What it becomes important, how responsibly can you do it? And then take some of the words that we'll consider in a conversation like this, how sustainably can you do it with respect and collaboration? So those are words that, those are concepts that drove me. And maybe one sort of anecdote that comes to mind. One of my mentors at university was Tim Cadigan, was a professor and a priest, and he really guided me in some really good ways. And I think about the last day on campus at University of Scranton, had my 1997 red Mercury Mountaineer packed up, ready to go. I love that truck, by the way, ready to go home and drive back to New York. But I had this feeling that I couldn't kick, and I said to myself, before I push the pedal and start driving, there's something I need to get off. There's something I need to talk out. I have to see Father Cadigan. So I called Father Cadigan and say, Father Tim, we got to talk. And he invites me into the rectory in the office where he was. And then we start talking. And I start opening up to him. I go, Father Tim, after 3 years of physio school, PT school, I still have questions. Is this what I'm supposed to do with my hands and my heart and my words? And where am I supposed to do it? And how? After the studying in the library and the rotations, I still have questions. How am I student? And where and why? And he was so reassuring. He goes, Efosa physical therapy is a healing profession, one in which you'll get a chance to use your hands and your heart and your words, and one I think you'd be good at. And he said a few other things, but then he finished with one thing. He stood me up and he walked me over to this wall. And on this wall was this painting of mountains and valleys. And he directed my gaze to it. He goes, Efosa, you see those mountains? You see those valleys? Go there. Climb the heights of those mountains, search the depths of those valleys. Go live your life. Go maximize your passion. Go live your life. Go maximizing your passion. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And it set the foundation of how I thought I may live my life, vocationally, personally, and certainly beyond. So that was one of the catalyzers.
Yeah, that was such a powerful story. And I remember a similar experience of my own, just getting that feeling of this is my passion, this is my vocation, and I have to follow this. And I don't know why, but this is what I was meant to do. And this is the way I was meant to learn and to share my passion and my gifts. And I just think that's so interesting that other people have similar experiences. And for any students listening, PTs, PTAs, if you have a similar passion, if you have a similar calling, please follow it. It can only lead to fantastic things. So our next question that I have is what have you learned about global health, and what is different or the same as healthcare in the US? I know from my personal experiences traveling to Latin America and doing my first clinical in Guatemala, actually, it was a very different experience in just the way that people trusted physical therapists, the way that people sought out medical care. And so I'm interested to hear from our guests what is different and what have you learned about global health in your experiences?
Great. I'm trying to think of how I want to answer that question, and what's coming to mind is that oftentimes we all have. I'm assuming many of the people on this meeting tonight have heard the term of cultural humility, and we talk a lot about that. And it is, of course, exceptionally important. But I think we need to give more than lip service to cultural humility. And I guess this is what I'm saying I've learned over time, is that it is one thing to say, I'm going to go into this experience and be humble and be willing to learn. And it's a whole nother thing to do that kind of with your whole heart, knowing that you do not know better. not just thinking we know better, but we're going to do that in a really humble way, but knowing that we don't know better and that there is a lot to be learned and that we should be seeking information from those that we partner with. And we are seen from the United States as people who, as healthcare professionals who know a lot, who have a lot. We're rich in the eyes of most of the world when we talk about developing countries, and they are already thinking that we have the answers. And I feel like it is our responsibility to say, we have knowledge, but it's no better than your knowledge or the knowledge of the people that you have working for you and with you. And so I think a lot about this idea of cultural humility and what it really means and what it means when we are on the ground in another place. And that knowledge and those thoughts come from, as I mentioned, errors that I've made, that people I have been abroad with have made, that students have made when we've been abroad, and all those kinds of experiences. So I think that's what I want to respond to that question with.
See, and the question is what's similar and what's different. I think mainly different, Lindsay, you said?
Yeah, and kind of what you've learned about global health in your experience.
I'll tag on the word health to start. The similarities stick out to me. First principles, the things that are similar, the things that if we're talking about promoting health and promoting wellness, being present with your client, building that connection, those words of compassion and empathy. That there's an old saying, all politics is local, all healthcare is local, right? Just being there is what I found to be true. A mother's love in Guatemala is the same as a mother's love in New York. They want to, or a parent's love, address their child's cough, or dance, address their hip pain so they could dance with their husband or dance with their wife. So those principles of then knowing how to connect and be humble and understanding a certain culture to get to that eventual point of a lot of healthcare, I think, is based around behavior change and behavior and optimization to catalyze whatever is good for the client, and how to sustain that good. So making that connection so you communicate. And if we're really taking it deeper to global health, knowing the different architecture and systems, the health apparatus in each country is different in the U.S. than it is from Sweden, is different from Sweden than it is from Guatemala. Much of my work has been now done in Guatemala as an entrepreneur, actually in Guatemala, also in the 501c3 space. And I've seen Jenny here a few times. We bump into each other and on some different projects. So just understanding the healthcare system, whether it's the municipality based, that's big in Guatemala, or whether it's private insurance, where there's options for those who have the means or certain jobs. Or there's a healthcare structure called IGS, which is sort of social security healthcare that's applicable to also those who have jobs and things of that nature. I think I said, cash, as you can, the national healthcare system, which is accessible to all, but what it offers, it's a spectrum. It tends to be low, or you have to pay into it. So bringing first principles to the healthcare experience: compassion, present, listening, looking to serve the client in front of you, and then navigating the system of that region, that country that you are. It's how I think about it. And then the similarities are very strong, and then the differences and the distinctions are the structure, so to speak.
Yeah, Jenny, you kind of mentioned it in your answer a little bit, but what are some of the potential harms of wanting to go and do global work, or, what are we worried about in terms of mistakes or cultural differences when we do this kind of service?
I think our biggest mistake is when we really behave in ways that damages our image. And I feel a lot of what we do when we travel internationally, whether it's for our own personal travel or for educational or service purposes, is to act like we're the center of what's going on. And so I think the biggest mistakes have to do with sort of acting like the, in quotes, ugly Americans that lots of people think we are, the spoiled, rich Americans. So that's one thing. Another thing is sort of going in like, bulls in china shops and not really taking the time to kind of sit back and listen first. And that's often hard because we're often going to places where we don't speak the language very well. I mean, I've traveled to Guatemala many, many, many times, and I speak some Spanish, but I don't do it well. And I have to realize that a lot is lost in translation, and we don't really know therapy. We don't really know a culture until we can speak the language. And so those sorts of arrogant, sort of self-centered behaviors, or even professional knowledge and all those kinds of things that we might go in with, I think are the worst mistakes. I feel like a lot of what we do is goodwill, and goodwill goes a long way. Smiling, being kind, being polite, sitting down in a person's home, whether it's clean or not, and meeting on their level socially. I'll use a Guatemalan example. There's always this little bit of time when you enter someone's home where you're chit-chatting and you're kind of setting the stage for what's about to happen. That time is really important. If you kind of go in there guns loaded to do what you need to do, you've lost well, first of all, I think you've lost some credibility. You've lost an opportunity to make more of the time that you have with them than you could have had. And it's just a mistake.
So, I agree with much of that. One of the things that you want to avoid in this space, we talk about community health and global health, is that idea of being jingoistic, or all that is West is best. Coming into a person's home to change the drapes. In our organization, before we start any project, we ask 3 questions. And the first question is, are we welcome here? Like truly ask that and wait for the answer. Are we welcome here? And then if we get through the threshold of that answer, the second question is ask the community members of a specific community, what do you guys see as some of the challenges, or what do you guys see as some of the opportunities? What do you see that live here 24/7 and are living it and considering it, the highs or maybe the other end of the spectrum? And then the other part after that question is, what do you guys see as some of the ways to overcome the challenges and to fulfill those opportunities? And do more listening than talking. Is that old thing? We have one mouth and 2 ears for a reason. Maybe we should be listening twice as much as talking, especially in this scenario. And then the way presents itself of how to minimize harm and how to maximize productivity, and things of that nature, and those principles of collaboration and respect. And that humility, I think Jenny used the word already. I came across listened to a podcast. I think somebody was quoting a gentleman called Ben Kaplan. The quote was, the further away you get from the shore, the more deep you realize the water is. So is that that sort of Dunning-Kruger effect. We have to make sure that our perceived knowledge is not sort of trumping our actual knowledge, and come from this angle of, we don't know much, and we're going to humbly try to learn as much as we can relative to the ocean of knowledge out there. And if we start that with humility, with respect, with seeking to understand the people and their place, wherever that is, whether it's New York or Nicaragua, that's a start of giving yourself a chance to optimize whatever good that you're aiming to do. So to avoid the downside is humility and intention are 2 of the many words and concepts to start considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of a great segue into my next question, which is, how do we minimize those harms and maximize the impact that we're making? I know some students, they get in their heads like, okay, I'm just going on a 1-week trip. How am I really making a big impact? Or how is what I'm doing short term going to last until the next group gets there? So do either of you kind of have insight on that, on how we maximize the impact that we can make while minimizing the potential harm?
I think I'll answer the question by sharing a 4-year journey that I've been on, sort of in a synopsis sort of way. When I started doing these projects, I asked those questions, Jenny, Lindsay, and audience. I did my first project after grad school. I did a project in Mexico, and in Guadalajara, Mexico, in grad school. After grad school, I did my first projects in the end of 2011 and early 2012, and I was asking myself the question: the nature of what we do with physios are usually over a couple of weeks and over a couple of months. So in these more traditional 2-week projects, overseas projects, or further away projects, how can we have an impact? So I said, okay, let me go explore and find out. So I started working with different organizations with different missions in different places around the world. Los Medicos Valeros, Flying Doctors of America, Hearts in Motion, which I think all three of us know. And Lindsay, I think you've done a project with them as well. And I will spend time with the leaders of everybody, the students, the professionals, the organization leaders, the other disciplines, and with the patients and clients. And on that front, I learned many things of how to participate in these projects, things I would do, and maybe things I would do different, which was important with shaping me, but also the importance of being in a place is powerful. We can have micro effects, because I think of this one client, her name is Maria, and this sort of leads to a concept where I call exponential love or change or linear love. Maria was one of those jornadas, which sort of those day projects where you go to a place and you're with the physicians and the nurses and the dentists, and you set up in a church, and the whole town shows up for help. And it's the marketing, it's word of mouth, it's magical marketing. You come in and 20 minutes later, there's several hundred people. I think we've all seen that. But by this time, this lady had heard about me, and I think I may have treated her sister, so she came right for me. And she's very emotional. I could sense I'm going to have to bring full attention to this one. And she started sharing with me, Efosa, that I hurt my shoulder a couple of weeks ago, and it's been painful. I can't get it past this, which was 90 degrees. It's affecting me playing with my kids, dancing with my husband, returning to work. So what can we do? And so we'll take a deep breath and start doing a few things. So we just started working her shoulder, some soft tissue work, some joint mobilization, neuromuscular rehab, postural optimization, things of that nature. And we're actually able to get her to full range of motion. She just hadn't got the care, so we're able to regress her or progress her pretty good to that baseline of benchmark, so she had full range of motion, and smiles, tears, and all that, hugs, abrazos, and all that. And then she left. And afterwards, I spent a couple of days thinking about Maria. And one of the things that I thought, by that collaboration that we had together, we were able to change her range of motion. By changing her range of motion, we changed her functional capacity. So now she could return to work, engage with her family in the way that she wanted to, and her friends. So by changing her functional capacity, we changed her family, and thus her ecosystem, and thus that community. And thus, I like to say the world. So I have this idea sometimes when I'm treating a shoulder, that's affecting the world, that rippling effect. And we certainly have that impact anywhere we are, Chicago, Columbia, et cetera, et cetera. So that was my first phase of learning, but then the next phase of learning, what does it look like to invest in time and relationships? So then for a couple of years, I started going back to the same place for about 3 years straight with Hearts in Motion to Zacapa, to Culatan, and Walan. And lo and behold, it was fascinating to see that the clients that we helped get better, they were still feeling better. The equipment that we helped to procure, whether within country or out of country, always want to be careful with displacing local economy as much as you could do inside a country, that's best. But those equipment that we're procuring for local centers were still being used. The education that we were sharing as humbly as possible was still being utilized. So I was starting to see that sustainable impact and sustainable change, which was great. And the next phase that I went to was thinking, how could we actually start to grow projects from the ground up? Go upstream, see what some of the challenging points and the pain points were. And that was a foundation for Move Together, working alongside with municipalities and towns and mayors, to actually now build clinics that are led by local physical therapists and physical therapy students, irregardless of whether we're there or not. So then it's full circle. A group of university or students could still come and work alongside this clinic as a point along the time continuum, because it is existing beyond. So that's been my journey of learning and growth in alliance to the question that you asked.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, did you have any other insight on how we maximize benefits?
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to actually put on my academic hat and use some information from some papers I've written. And I think it starts with the preparation. And so if we're talking about school-related trips, programs that have international opportunities. I think the first way we can begin to reduce harm is by training the faculty who lead the trips really well. There are certainly instances where faculty are brought along as helpers and they don't even know what they're getting into. And so training faculty really well to lead a trip is very important. The second is adequately preparing students and giving them all the good kind of information about not just the theory behind what they're about to do, meaning, humility and all those other things that we've been discussing, but the logistics. I have been amazed when I've gone abroad with students and they have no idea about the geography or, some very simple things that, probably would have been important to understand ahead of time. I was making some notes. The other thing that one of the practices that I use when I'm away with students is to have I call it a 5:30 meeting. And every day we have a 5:30 meeting and we debrief from the day. We talk about the good and the bad of that day. We talk about how to prepare for the next day, and those kinds of things. They're logistics, but they also help in reducing harm because you're having conversations initially and then on an ongoing basis about the interactions you've had and the things that have gone on. Of course, there's physical safety and risk management and harm to ourselves while we're away, but also, reducing harm in the community that we're going into. And then the two other things that are, of course, in the literature and I think we're going to talk about shortly is the importance of the strength of the partnership. The organization that you are working with and partnering in that has to really be a good collaboration with common goals and understandings about what's going to happen. And, there's good and bad examples of that in my history too, but that's another important thing. And then, as Efosa was set it up perfectly, train the trainer. Opportunities are always the best, where you are sharing knowledge and empowering the people with your community partners to then carry out what it is that you've worked with them on. And those are the best, most sustainable kinds of partnerships.
Absolutely. I know a couple organizations are, working to do more train the trainer projects just because it is a great way for that impact to become sustainable, to become long-term, and to not just go and do your work and leave. And
and it's so empowering for the learners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that so much. I'll piggyback to just double click on everything Jenny just said. That idea of preparation is huge. It's so essential. It fertilizes the ground, for when you land, so to speak. So I know that's how Jenny operates. And when I have the chance to collaborate with people, have people come down to Guatemala, we start preparing at least 3 months in advance. A whole Google Drive and an email chain and 2 calls, and have people start to engage and understand the culture as much as one can in that time, and to prepare yourself to learn more, and then understanding, have an intention and a bit of an objective while leaving open to sort of be present on the ground. But Jenny talked about sort of the structure of how to make sure you can aim things as well as possible. And there's, as a project leader, often in this project, there's certain things that I'm considering, right? Considering safety, security, transportation, food, lodging, and then the objective and the logistics. And those 4 or 5 things usually capture as much of a project. And then you want to empower the whole team to get a sense of understanding and ownership of those ideas, as much as possible, and really have the right attitude, so to speak, about anything that we may do. We sometimes shock people when we say that the very important word is going to be the F word. That F word stands for flexibility. Also when you're on the ground. And this is tangential, but it's on my mind now. We'll probably come to it again later. Jenny used the word goodwill often earlier. And most people who are interested in this work comes from an amazing place. They feel called to do good, or they want to do good, or they want to engage in a new, see what they could do in a new arena. That's all beautiful, So then what becomes important in this, I hope I'm not misquoting Celia. I think Celia Pichik has a great quote. I may be paraphrasing it, but in this world where there's so much need, it becomes so important to optimize our resource. So when we get 10 students or 15 students or 10 physios or 15 physios, prepare and plan so that where we're on the ground, we can be as precise as possible without time, without skills, without sharing, without learning, without growing, and if that mindset, if we're at that mindset, again, it gives us the best chance to minimize the not so good, obviously, and optimize that which might be good.
Of course. All right, we're going to take a quick little break here for a couple announcements. So the APTA Student Assembly Network for the 2021 House of Delegates is still open until September 12th. So you can go ahead and join that GroupMe and be involved in the conversation surrounding House of Delegates. Additionally, there are lots of Centennial events coming up, including the PT Summit Leadership Conference, which is available virtually. So be sure to check that out at centennial.apta.org. Also be watching for more information at the beginning of September for the announcement of the 2021-22 APTA Student Assembly Board of Directors slate. So that will be coming out soon, and you will be able to vote for the next incoming board of Student Assembly Board of Directors. So we will go ahead and bring our guests back and continue the conversation on global health. So Jenny kind of mentioned right before we went into announcements, how do we know that an organization is going to be impactful? How do we vet an organization and continue to work with organizations that are doing good and more good than harm? So Jenny and Efosa, do you have any thoughts on that? How do we vet an organization as students, PTs, PTAs?
Go ahead, Efosa.
See, I couldn't tell if we were frozen there. How do we vet? Well, the first decision is to vet. So if you made that decision, you're already on the way, and you gather a lot of information through one's website and their social media and things like that. That's sort of that first phase. But then try to engage with the team as much as possible, leadership of the organization, and understand what your values are. I always like to say service. The idea of service in some of this work that we're doing, it's okay for it to be bi-directional. To be fulfilled in it. One doesn't need to go within that might make them quote unquote miserable, whatever that means. Be fulfilled in it, but then if there's going to be something that's most important, do something you feel that you can fulfill an objective and fulfill others. So maybe know say to yourself, know thyself first. That'll be very important. And then as you do your research of different organizations, see where there may be a alignment, and a connection, and then reach out to leaders, those who work at 501c3s and NGOs. They tend to welcome that conversation as opposed to maybe a big Fortune 100 company. May be hard to get in touch sometimes, maybe not, but you may have a better chance. You'll have a better chance getting in touch with the leader of an organization via email or via the phone or one of the team members. Reach out to people who may have participating in some programs or some projects with that organization. And again, asking questions that may lead to answers that may see is, would I be able to bring value on this project? Would this somewhere that I feel at peace with being there and doing things? So questions like that or a journey like that is important. And that could get multivariated. But the first decision, which you're already on the way, is by deciding, I want to be intentional. What do I do? Around the corner, around the world. For some people, they may feel called to serve near first, in their backyard and stay serving near. Or say, okay, I served near, I feel called, I want to continue. I feel now more prepared to serve maybe farther, see what that looks like. Some people, they feel called to serve far first, and continue to serve far. But then they may also ask themselves, what can I bring back? What can I do right in my backyard or do both along the way? There is no right or wrong. I just like to say, where can you do it responsibly? Where can you do it in a place that you welcome, and where can we hopefully feel good? Those are the principalistic questions, or at least some of them, to consider.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Efosa said, but I am going to put in a shameless plug. And that's that in one of my roles is I serve on the board of the Health Policy and Administration section as the Director of Social Responsibility. And my sub role in that role is the chair of the Global Health Special Interest Group, which I encourage anyone listening to join. you have to go to the health policy section first and then find the global health SIG down within. But we have great resources. There are lots of people who have experience with lots of different organizations, and you can, ask a question on our Facebook page, or you can email any one of us on the leadership team of the SIG, and we can help you put you in touch with somebody who may know something about an organization that you're thinking about working with. And because sometimes it's really hard to tell if it's a good organization or not. So I will just say, join a group that thinks about this stuff a lot. And there are lots of really good resources there.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to add something on there too. If your school has a relationship with an organization, like a long lasting relationship, and continuously goes back to the same community to continue the work, I think that's a pretty good sign as well, that is a vetted organization that's doing, long-term impact. So that's what my school had arranged. They've had a long-lasting relationship with Hearts in Motion down in Guatemala, and so that's how they were able to send me there for a full-time clinical. And Hearts in Motion is very well known in Guatemala, as I'm sure Efosa knows, having moved together down there. Efosa kind of brought it up a little bit, but what are the bi-directional cultural experiences that people can expect to have when serving globally? From my experience, I know it's never just one way. You may give something, but I feel like I learned so much more, and I get so much more back than I could ever give on these global experiences. So what are some of those bi-directional cultural experiences that someone might expect?
See, it's funny. Years ago, when doing these projects, I used to actually feel a bit guilty because they were so enjoyable. It's like, should it be this much fun or this much enjoyable? I think it speaks to so many things. All that is beautiful in communities around the world, and then exposed to different community. The idea of hospitality, different foods and different histories, different stories. It's just so very beautiful. One of my favorite things now when going on a project, being on a project, or mainly welcoming a team down here, is to see the transformation that happens. So let's say we have some students coming from Jenny's, Dr. Audette's programs, when they land in La Aurora Airport in Guatemala City, which looks a little bit different from JFK or Atlanta Airport. It just looks different, so that sort of exposure to different, not deficient, not less, not this, just different, and everybody getting their bearings. And then as we drive to the place that we're staying, driving by the mountains and the rolling hills, and starting to hear a cacophony of different sounds, and seeing the beginning of the transformation, and those early days of team building, of sharing stories of what was our why did we decide to come, and sometimes there being smiles and a combination of tears within one sharing, and then showing up in the clinic or in a jornada, and so we're maybe setting up clinic and stepping up, and then maybe a client that comes to you and saying, this hurts, this are kind of dancing, all this hurts, because they haven't had that care at all, and you figuring it out, or treating from the depths of your heart or the top of your intelligence with yourself and the person right next to you, working as a team to serve the client as much as possible, which just starts again by being present and maybe some touch, and then see people relearn or learn for the first time the power of touch, even if you can't communicate with words. And then towards the end and throughout that week, eating different foods and having different conversations. And towards the end of the week in Guatemala, we usually go to Lake Atitlan, or we go to Antigua, and a chance for reflection and maybe a little salt. Things of that nature, having this whole spectrum of experience, all oriented still about going to a community. The high order bit is hopefully not just going and leaving something positive behind in the community, taking something positive with you, obviously, in terms of growth. There's a bidirectionality that is really unmeasurable at its best, so to speak. So those words may not do it justice, but that's a bit of a snapshot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my favorite part of taking students is watching them, and I'll use the cliche that's around now, but it matters, is leaning in to the experience and really just soaking up every opportunity that they have to be a part of what's going on. And that's everything from food to talking with people to, making friends with locals or whatever. Is all those things really matter. And then I think the other thing that really adds to it is, and Efosa mentioned this earlier, is identify the samenesses and not the differences. And once you start to really appreciate those, I think that is what really lends to the bidirectionality. If you're always saying, oh, it was so different and it was this and it was that, and it is, that's true. But look for those samenesses, like, the mother who just wants her child taken good care of, or the sibling who brings their, younger sister or brother to the clinic on their back. And not that we have to do that, but it's like, what is it about that special sibling bond that maybe you could relate to, or share? Sharing a meal with people is always really telling and touching and special and important. People are giving of themselves to serve you that meal, and it can be a really special time. So that's what I would some examples of what I would call leaning into the experience and really enjoying it.
Just brings me back to Guatemala. I when Efosa and Jenny are talking about it, it's just like, oh, I feel like I'm back there. And I can just remember those experiences so vividly, and they just bring so much joy. Mm-hmm. So to kind of continue on this, and what is our purpose? What is our point here? What do you believe is our role as PTs and PTAs to be present and involved in a global health scale? What do we have to offer and to learn by getting involved in these efforts?
So, I think about it as community health. I'm starting to use that term more. I'm in the midst of using it more and seeing how I feel about it. But then if I'm thinking about it, community health, I'll go to thinking about us as physiotherapists. I think we need to start thinking more ourselves as sort of community clinicians, not just within the clinic walls, but beyond the clinic walls. Whether it's legitimately in your town, wherever you may be listening to this right now, in Maine, in New York, wherever it is. I'm down in Guatemala City. Understanding the community to see how you can best serve the community within the walls and beyond. And then if we take it to the next level and I say, okay, there's no distinction, we're now a global world. The next question is, where can you do that responsibly, plus where you're also welcome, then things become a little bit flattened out, So I think the first question is to look within and see how we see ourselves as clinicians, see how we see ourselves as a profession, and then go there which we may do good. And then as we explore in some different architecture and structural healthcare systems and apparatus like we talked about earlier, I'm mainly here in Guatemala, and I've learned so much that is going to be applicable, that will be applicable than anything I do in the 501c3 front or the entrepreneur front in the United States. So going to different places to hopefully facilitate good, that's a good way to maybe think about it in a humble way. And then to also grow as well, to expand our knowledge, to see what first principles that are being reinforced and sharpened about how to engage with the clinician. I treat in a clinic here. I lead a clinic here, and I have clients. The same things that are important in Guatemala, in Georgia, and New York are important here. That thorough first eval and asking what hurts, where it hurts, how does it hurt, how have things progressed. I sometimes set up a question when I go to the client. I say, I got a bit of a philosophical question. It's what do you want? It's the what do you want question. What are you hoping for your future? Is it to run this marathon? Is it to be able to travel and walk Europe with your wife? Is it be able to return to work? And keeping that sort of macro vision there, and then tying everything that we then do now, the micro acts, to that macro vision, that is applicable everywhere else in the world. I think it'd be important for us to remember that as a clinician, what is that metric? What is that aim that's important to the client? And let that guide the journey. And I've developed and grown more as a clinician here in Guatemala, that wherever I find myself in the future is going to manifest itself, even on the 1 or 2 or 3 week trips I've developed as a clinician. So those are things coming in this way. But then hopefully, ideally, growing with our fellow brothers and sisters in the physio profession, the overall rehab world. When we come down to Guatemala, we do these labs where we're looking to learn from the physiotherapists in Guatemala and share from them as well. That bidirectionality is not sort of going down, here are these texts, learn it and grow and do as with your will. What can we learn from your techniques? I've learned a lot from students here in Guatemala City and beyond, physios and physicians and physical therapists, so sharing knowledge. That's why I love about the HVO mission, of education, making education the centralizing point. So if I'm bringing some things home, that bidirectionality, doing these projects lead to growth for all involved and can lead to more sustainable good that may affect the local system, whether it's a municipality or whether it's a country, and may lead to nuggets and ideas and insights that can be brought back to wherever our home base is. But the macro ideas of the most well world, in whichever way, again, we can do that responsibly and with intention as a private clinician, as working within a hospital system, in this 501c3 work, NGO work, through what portal can we step into to contribute to the most well world, and just answer that as truly as you can. And that's the beginning of the journey. That is a good amount of the journey.
I agree with everything Efosa said, and I'm going to take my answer in a little different direction. And that is that I'm going to take it back to the, sort of the evolution of my knowledge and involvement in global health. And I've tried really hard over the last many years to learn more about physical therapists and where it exists, physical therapist assistant education around the world. What does that look like? How are they trained? How do they get employed? Where do they work? Where do they do clinicals? Do they do all those kinds of things I've really tried to learn more about to have a better understanding of our profession as a global profession. And some of that has come through involvement and engagement with World Physiotherapy, which is our world entity, and resources that they have, being involved with them, attending their conferences, and really trying to learn more about PT practice around the world. And I think, that's super interesting and makes you feel part of something bigger. And that, of course, has led to meeting some amazing colleagues around the world and getting to know them and their expertise and their love for what they do. I mean, Haiti is an unbelievable example. I mean, Haiti couldn't have more stacked against it ever. And, there are PTs there that have to go abroad to be trained as PTs, and they go back and they work in Haiti, even though it has to be one of the most difficult places to work in the world. And that is incredible. That kind of dedication, that kind of desire for education and to seep up knowledge wherever they can is unbelievable. And so I would say that that's where I would bring it all back to. And the more we can learn about our profession at large, that also helps with the cultural humility part, because, when you have an understanding about how Guatemalan physical therapists are trained, you come from a different place than when you just arrive there and go in without having that knowledge, because lots of PTs all over the world know a lot and have skills, like Efosa was saying, learning from them, they have some great skills that we don't. And so I'll end my response with that.
Thank you for that. I have one final question before we kind of wrap things up. If anyone else who's tuning in right now has a question, comments, feel free to drop it in the chat. But my final question is, what can students do who are interested in getting involved in community health? I like that word that Efosa brought up, community health. So either at the local level, maybe the state level, the national, even international. What can students do who are interested in following their passion and following this vocation to serve the community?
Yeah. Let's see. I wonder if I should go from this angle. We'll see if I go to a certain angle. But one of the first things is understanding, again, some of the opportunities and challenges that are out there as well as you can through research, through conversation, and things of that nature, and getting a sense of what areas, whether it's topic-wise or geographic-wise, that speak to you, so to speak, and just diving in, is it the Middle East? Is it Latin America? Is it inner city this or rural that? Just seeking understanding, and then doing research of what some others, if you land on something, see what some others are doing already in the space, what has been done in this space. So diligence, I think, is important. Before maybe diving in. Because if you dive in without sort of a historical context, you may not be inefficient with resources, or you may be missing something that may lead you to not minimize harm and maximize good. So know thyself, and wherever that leads you to, start researching the things that you feel called to do, and start thinking about some of the others doing that, and any of the institutions that you may be part of, or that exist, whether it's your program, or whether it's a Global Health SIG, or whether it's World Physio Association, engage with those places and build relationships through that. On a project programmatic level, a little bit of human-centered design. There's this design thinking principle that the solution is found within the problem. A lot of people try to fit a problem to a solution as opposed to understanding the problem first and then seeing what's the most efficient solution that is yielded. So doing your work. Whose problem or opportunity is it? Who's working on it? What's the ideal world in the eradication of this problem and the fulfillment of the opportunity? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the end beneficiaries? I may have said that already. Then restate your question or your desire or your sort of your inspiration, and then starting to see what are some of the barriers to that ideal state or that better. And that's a bit of a design mandate. And from there, start brainstorming what can be done. Then you start strategizing and protocolizing and things like that, and create something called a logic model, which looks at your input, your activity, and resources, and outcomes and outputs, which is a little bit different. But we could talk about that later on. But starting to think about, if you ever want to think about collaborating or leading, quote unquote, serving leading in these projects, go deep and do the deep work. And I'll pause there.
I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add, except to just, again, get involved with groups that are already doing the work and learn from people that have been doing it for a while. And I mean, Efosa and I are on this call tonight, but I want to put a shout out to all of our global health colleagues that are out there doing great stuff, whether it's pro bono work, whether it is, really strong focuses on social justice and those kinds of issues, and all of our friends who go internationally to do their own volunteer work or take students abroad. And we can certainly put you in touch with other people. I don't even like to call myself an expert I'm definitely engaged and involved, but I have learned from some really great colleagues. So we can put you in touch with people who can help you.
Absolutely. I would say everyone on this call tonight is a fantastic resource. If you're interested in learning more about community health, global health, how to get involved, we can kind of direct you to the right people, especially if your program does not have anything like this, if they don't have an international partnership, know that there are other options and resources available. Did either of our guests have any final comments, anything you want to add on this discussion? I feel like an hour was not nearly enough time, so we may have to continue this discussion in the future at some point, but any final comments from either of our guests?
This was a good start. An hour is the beginning, and then I think Lindsay's going to share our information. Feel free to reach out to us. I'm speaking on behalf of Jenny on that front. And then this call to do good. If for any of you guys who are interested in this work, that call is a good calling. Now do your best to aim yourself as well as possible and enjoy the journey of promoting wellness around the world.
Yeah, and I'm just really excited for anyone on this call who gets involved and is able to have some amazing global health experiences and bring them into their professional career.
Absolutely. If anyone watching this either live or on the replay has any other questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the box down below. Teo is going to share Jenny and Efosa's emails. So again, if you have any questions and would like to contact them or reach out, please do so. They are open to hearing from you. They'd love to hear from you and help guide you in your journey. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Lindsay Durand. I am the Director of Communications for the Student Assembly Board of Directors, and this was APTA Live Student Night. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.